Welcome to the Protagonist Pub. My name is Tammy, and this is where characters gather.
Oh, the weather outside is frightful, but fire is so delightful. And since we've no place to...
And I'm going to go over what I read in December. My brain is telling me I have forgotten a book because for some reason I didn't write down what I wrote. And what that forgotten book is, I don't know. I have absolutely no clue. So I will, if I remember, I will talk about it in January, and if not, oh well. And yes, the older girls are grumbly this morning. So December was a very busy month. Not just, Christmas and Advent, but Dave traveled for a whole week. And I spent that whole week, not reading. I was doing deep cleaning while he was out of the house, or as much deep cleaning as one could actually do with 3 dogs in the process of shedding. So it was a very busy month. However, what I can remember reading, I absolutely loved. So there are a total of 3 books that I know I read in December. The last one I finished the very last day of December. And one of these 3 books is an all-time favorite for 2025. So let's talk about all 3 books. But first, let me get coffee. Okay, the bird is now outside. So, One December Morning by Emma Davies. I read this on Kindle Unlimited. And I mentioned this in my end of November wrap up. It's the one with the older protagonist. And while I don't remember any of the characters' names, I did enjoy this story. It's not a romance. It is what I would call, it's just a family story. So our female protagonist, it's set in England, by the way, is coming home from her aunt's house, who is, I don't know, mid to late 70s, maybe it's 80. And it's the 24th of December. And she has to stop to get gas. It's like a 2-hour drive from her aunt's house to her house. And we quickly learn that it's snowing, that she's a widow, and she's happy with her place in life. And this is a very difficult time of the year because her husband passed on Christmas Eve. So she stops at the gas station, she gets gas, and a fellow traveler pulls in, and she immediately notices that he's about her age. He appears to be a little mismatched, sweater and socks and shoes not, coordinating well. And she gives him a snack out of her car because, she's loaded down with Christmas food, like, we all are at that time of year. And they part ways. Don't think, anything, it's not something she's sitting there reflecting on. And they drive a little bit down the road, and, she sees him pass her on the highway, and she's like, "Oh, was that guy from the, petrol station?" Soon enough, traffic is at a complete standstill for a couple hours. There's unfortunately been a very bad accident, and she sees his car up ahead, so she grabs some treats out of her car. She knocks on his window, and they have this lovely conversation stuck in traffic about their families and what they're expecting and how much they are or are not looking forward to the holidays. And it's just this lovely interlude in a, situation we have all been in it multiple times in our lives. And eventually traffic returns to normal. They go their separate ways. And the way things happen in novels, unsurprisingly, you will be shocked to know that they meet again. And what happens is just this very lovely story that unfolds about how life doesn't always go according to plan. And how even in the midst of tragedy, it is possible to move forward into the future, reconcile relationships that are struggling in the present, and help those you love. Now, is it possible our female and male protagonists in the future find their way forward together? It is absolutely possible based on the whole story. But this was just lovely. It's completely secular. But it was still, you could still just... If you have a Catholic worldview, Christian worldview, you can see those hints in this story. And they were lovely. You could see how it could be altered ever so slightly to bring those characteristics in. But even in its secular form, it was just a story about the power of hope and the power of love and the power of opening your heart to change. It was lovely. I absolutely recommend it. All right. Kahlua has joined us because, yesterday she decided she could, liberate herself. Luckily, Mom caught it pretty quickly, but yeah, I would prefer it if she stayed on my lap versus, wandering off on her own in the neighborhood. Even though we have a very quiet, low traffic neighborhood. So we're not sure how she got out yesterday. She used to do this when she was very wee, and she would climb over the fence. Well, she could climb over the fence, but she could never climb herself back into the yard. So we didn't find any holes yesterday. There are no scrapes on her belly, so we're not quite sure how she got out. We think we have a big gate in our fence, and we think she put her head through and where the gate latches, and we think where her head went, the rest of her body went. So we've solved that issue, but yeah, Mama would just like it if you didn't do that again. She's also lost 15 pounds in 2025, and I think she needs to put another 5 back on in case she did climb over, because then she wouldn't be able to get herself up and over. So I will gladly put 5 pounds back on her to prevent the, intense worry that goes with your dog has disappeared over the fence. Okay, so we're going to talk about the next 2 books out of order. This was on my January TBR. This was a library book. This is The Award by Matthew Pearl. This was a brand new release. I think this was a new release to my library. I believe this is a 2025 release, however. This book is short. It is under 250 pages. And I tend to have a love-hate relationship with Matthew Pearl. So this was released in 2025. This is a odd murder mystery. So if you loved The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Totten, You will probably enjoy this book because it is full of twists and turns. However, I hated every character in this book immensely. Our protagonist is a male in his, I'll be generous and say late 20s, early 30s. And he's finished his MFA program, and he lives in Cambridge, Massachusetts, you know, where Harvard is and all those schools. And he is living with his girlfriend. They want a new place to live, and so they move into this house, right? And he's a struggling author working on his first novel. She's paying most of the rent. They find this great upstairs apartment, and down below he finds out one of the most famous authors still alive lives downstairs. And he thinks this is going to be his entree into getting publishing and into the right circles and, you know, all that stuff, right? And there's a lot of inner dialogue in this book. It's not the majority of it, but there's a lot. And the man is clearly delusional from the beginning. He is very obsessed with what his colleagues are doing in Cambridge and what's going on in the literary world, and just he's very wrapped up in all of that. And this quickly devolves into the novelist downstairs is just a prick, and he's still determined. He's, you know, eventually into the novelist downstairs is just a prick, and he's still determined. He's, you know, eventually he publishes his book, and it gets chosen as best debut novel by the Boston Literary Society, and it sets up his path to success, right? And then he has a meeting with one of the board members, and they're like, oops, the intern put the wrong book title, you know, awardee as the award. It actually meant to go to another author with the exact same book title, except you have a the in front of it and the other author didn't. And this takes our protagonist and just spins him out of emotional control. Very subtly, very slowly. And he's at the Christmas party with the downstairs neighbor because he's been invited, obviously, because now he's someone in the literary circle. And without giving anything away, a murder occurs. Things happen. Someone is falsely accused of the crime. Our protagonist continues on his path. His success is, you know, guaranteed at this point. He meets with the falsely accused in prison. He makes a choice, which then leads to other choices. It's just this very twisty, turny story that I did not enjoy, but I also couldn't put down. Take that for what you may. I cannot say too much because it will give away those twists and turns, much like Evelyn Hardcastle. But I will say that Matthew Pearl can write. That's why I have a love-hate relationship. And he writes the city of Boston, which is where most of his novels, if not all of his novels, take place, very, very well. So if you've ever been to Boston, lived in Boston, surrounding area, you will recognize Boston as a character in his stories, and the competitive academic atmosphere that pervades that section of Boston. But it's also that same competitive academic atmosphere that drives me batty. Don't know how else to put it. And this time, this was a very contemporary novel. He normally writes historical. And if I had to choose between his historical and this one, I would choose the historical ones. This one wasn't bad, but it is a very good reflection of society and all that is off-putting and off-kilter about that. So know that going in. Okay, and that leads me to the surprise pickup. I actually own this on my Kindle. I picked up a copy of the library just because it's, easier for editing purposes. That is Thief by Chelsea Abdullah. And normally when I buy a Kindle book, I make sure my library doesn't have it. And apparently I didn't this time around. And I'm very glad, because I probably would not have picked this book up had I not had it on my Kindle and been in a fantasy mood. I also didn't expect to love this book because our protagonists are in their early 20s, maybe as late as mid-20s, and that's a lot younger than I have been reading of late. So this is Arab fantasy. It was completely clean. There may have been one swear word in this book, but it was completely appropriate at the time. And I realized I have never talked about this book, so I'm going to read you the back, or in this case, the flap dust jacket. Neither here nor there, but long ago. Luli al-Nazari is the midnight merchant, a criminal who, with the help of her jinn bodyguard, hunts and sells illegal magic. When she saves the life of a cowardly prince, she draws the attention of his powerful father, the Sultan, who blackmails her into finding an ancient lamp that has the power to revive the barren land, at the cost of sacrificing all jinn. With no choice but to obey or be executed, Luli journeys with the Sultan's oldest son and one of his infamous 40 thieves to find the artifact. Aided by her bodyguard, who has secrets of his own, they must survive ghoul attacks, outwit a vengeful Jinn queen, and confront a malicious killer from Luli's past. In a world where story is reality and illusion truth, Luli will discover that everything, her enemy, her magic, even her own past, is not what it seems. Now she must decide who she will become. It is told from multiple points of view. Does not make it difficult to follow if that usually bothers you, because every chapter is labeled with the character name telling the story for that chapter. Chapters are not usually that long, and I loved everything about this book. It is beautifully written. I believe this was her debut novel. There is a map of the journey in the front, and there are stories throughout that move the narrative along, and you just immerse yourself very, very quickly. It is 465 pages. Yep, 463 pages. I literally could not put it down. It is immersive. the action doesn't overwhelm the narrative storytelling, but when there is an action scene, you are immediately just immersed in it. And what makes this so unique among fantasy books is very rarely do you get a fantasy that is set in the Middle East. And very rarely do you get not just a fantasy, but a book that beautifully describes the desert and the desert environment, and how that is much like in a William Kent Kruger novel. The environment plays a very big factor throughout this story. And it was so well done. It is a very moving story about discovering who you are in relationship to your past, your family's past, and that what we're told by our parents and, surrounding family may not actually be the entire story. This is just a beautiful novel. And I have the second one. As you know, it's on my January pile of possibilities. I am probably starting it here this week, eagerly. It was supposedly a duology, and now there are hints. I believe on Goodreads it says that there's a third book. So I will undoubtedly be all over that when it releases, but I cannot recommend the story enough. The story of Luli and her journey and, the things she discovers about herself and her family and what, the prince she's traveling with discovers about himself and his family and all the ramifications of those discoveries and how their two lives are now intertwined is fantastic. There is echoes of a romance in this book. It is not the focus of this book, but it is a part of the story, and it probably will play out more so in the next book, and I am okay with that. Not every book has to be a romance to be good. I strongly recommend this book. And if my little library has it, yours probably does too. But if it's available on sale on Kindle, absolutely pick it up. You will not be disappointed. Okay. To the best of my knowledge, that is all I read in December. Like I said in the beginning, there is something in the back of my brain saying I've missed a book, but I don't know what that is at this point. So we're just going to have to go with the flow. I hope everybody had a great end of 2025. We had a nice, quiet Christmas. The weather was, mid-70s, 80 on Christmas Day. It was very nice. So, I hope everyone is having a blessed and happy new year. And I look forward to hearing about what you read in December in the comments. Let me know down below, like and subscribe, and I will see you here next time at the Protagonist Pub.
Oh, the weather outside is frightful, but fire is so delightful. And since we've no place to go, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow.